Just one sec, guys, ladies. Let's see. How's I going to do this? Is this correct? I don't have a great memory, even though we just did this 5 seconds ago. Is
Okay,
that
this
good?
is on.
Okay.
That's on.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, ladies, thank you so much for coming out, especially the day after Halloween, like we were talking about. It's like the day after Christmas, and it's almost harder, I think, especially if your kids are little. So y'all get major gold stars because it's hard to come out anyway. But thank you, thank you, thank you. And also, I meant to change one thing in the bio per my husband. He said instead of my now husband, I should have said my current or first husband. But anyway, never mind. I thought, I don't know everybody, so that might not go over.
I was going to make light of that when I read it.
Yeah. Her current husband, there's been so many. So really, thank you guys. I remember when I was in your shoes. It doesn't seem like that long ago. I guess it was a while back. But anyway, it is like a monumental task to get out the door and to get up here. So thank you for making that sacrifice. Tonight, I just wanted to share a few resources with you that I have come across dealing with my kids. And I don't want it to be a boring list. Maybe, I hope it doesn't turn into that. But especially since we have a small group, if you want to chime in, just go for it. So anyway, here we go. All right. So during the pandemic, our family, I have a gigantic family, we had a bridal shower for one of the cousins. And one of the tasks for our digital shower was to share some words of wisdom. And of course, I just said, I don't know, look at the ladies that have been married 50 years. But one of my cousins had a very wise insight, and she said that it would be great if you become a student of your husband and then later of your children. So I'd never really thought about it in those terms of being a student. So I'm going to take it one step further. So that could involve being observant, so particularly with your children. So what are their gifts? What needs do they have? How do they respond in different situations? Are some tasks more difficult for them than for their peers? Do they have difficulty navigating everyday situations? Do they get frustrated very easily? Are they able to function well in public but then feel super stressed at home? So these are just some questions. There's hundreds of other questions, but these are just kind of a starting point, okay? So I feel like we have a biblical example of this. Jesus was a student of his flock. He met people where they were, and he ministered to them accordingly. He didn't criticize them for having problems, but he rather helped them. And he wasn't upset. Oh no, you have a problem. I don't know what to do. He saw the problem and helped them. I think of the woman at the well. I think of all, his many, many healings. I mean, just the entire New Testament where he's ministering to people. I just wanted to I want to talk about these resources, and also my underlying, maybe not so subliminal message is don't be afraid to try new things, okay? All right, so both of my children have experienced some extra challenges, and I share this with their permission. I'm not ratting them out, and I don't think it's ratting out anyway, just to share. So, and particularly for them, many of those difficulties were right under the radar. So they were very high functioning, do very well in school, but come home and kind of like fall apart, and so as a mom, I'm like, something is off. My husband and I would notice, this is a little different, that's a little unusual, but it was so subtle, so, difficult. So we just kind of had to unearth some things. And I want to preface this. Obviously, I'm a designer. I'm not an educator. I'm not a healthcare professional. I'm just a mom sharing some experiences. So, I'm just going to share this. There's this, and there's professionals who know a lot more about all of this than I do. But I'm just going to share our experiences. So I felt very empowered to help my children because my mom had given me a great example. Trying to remember how old I was. I think I was about 4. I had a speech impediment. I had a lisp, and my mom took me to a private speech therapist, and then later I was with the elementary school speech pathologist. And anyway, I hated doing those mouth exercises. Believe it or not, you have, back in the day, this is decades ago, you had these little mouth exercises you had to do to help reteach, how to make that sound. So, but anyway, but I'm glad. So she kind of led the way for me. So when we're talking about resources, one place to start, and I think maybe kind of start at the very beginning, is your pediatrician. And your pediatrician, if you notice something unusual, go to your pediatrician. So, I've noticed ABC, or I've noticed this, and kind of get their feedback. And even if they don't think that they're seeing that, it doesn't mean that it's not there. So listen to your intuition, listen to your instincts. You probably already know a lot of this, but there are a lot of different types of pediatricians, right? So that's not something that I necessarily knew when I was a new parent, that, all the specialists you have as an adult, you have all those on the pediatric level, okay? So start with our pediatrician. I'm just going to throw this out there right out of the chute. Sometimes it can be difficult to pinpoint a problem, especially if your child is very high functioning. I wanted to mention a resource that helped us tremendously is cognitive testing. It's a series of tests and subtests that can better determine how a child thinks, how they receive and assimilate information, the depth of their working memory, and even the breadth of their known vocabulary. In the school district, we usually offer this service. We chose to do this privately. It can be kind of expensive, but we kind of saved, and it was fantastic. So it provided a wealth of information that could be interpreted into ways in which could help our children better learn. We received a detailed report and a presentation about every test, and we were told if our child was below level, on level, above level. And the real disparity comes in for a lot of children when they have all. So maybe they have a third, above level, a third on level, and a third below level. So the disparity between the upper level and the below level is what can really provide a lot of frustration and stress, and a lot of difficulties for children, okay? So we found that super, super helpful. And if I'd known about it when my children were younger, I would have just go directly there. I would have just done that. Okay, and one of the resources I had alluded to is a developmental pediatrician. And I didn't even know there was such a thing as a developmental behavioral pediatrician. So they can diagnose and address such issues as learning disorders to some extent, depends on their level of specialty, ADHD, anxiety, and depression. They're well-versed in all of these areas, and they can help provide solutions. I mean, you may look at your child, and again, I was going to say too, this may not apply to your child. You may have a friend or a neighbor or somebody that's saying, kind of giving you these. This happens to me fairly often. Somebody will describe some scenario with their child, and I'm like, that sounds so familiar. And, to be able to offer that help is just, can really lighten someone's day for sure. The one thing that I really appreciated about developmental behavioral pediatricians is with ADHD, it can be in various forms. And I don't mean to harp on this, this is the one thing I've dealt with. And it can be manifested differently from boys and girls, there's 2 different types. It can be combined, especially inattentiveness. If a child is inattentive, that may not be diagnosed for years, and they're kind of suffering because they have an inability to focus as well as they could. Okay, another resource that we found super helpful was sensory integration therapy, and this was one of the first things that we did. So depending on which clinic you go to, and I think, is Anna Morgan? I think she works in sensory. She's in the schools. Okay, so Anna I think she did work. I kept meaning to ask her. She did work at a sensory integration therapy clinic. And depending on which one you go to, they're either physical therapists and or occupational therapists. So this therapy can better integrate the input that we receive from the central nervous system. Okay, and as the chart shows, it's just the different senses that it addresses. And sometimes there can be areas that are not regulated well, and that can cause a lot of stress for a child. One of our children, it seems so basic, but had a problem with balance, and so we didn't really know. And so one of them had, super, super high gross motor skills and very low fine motor skills, and then the other one was flipped. And so again, it's that disparity between being super high in one area and the low level in another area that can really, really manifest itself in a lot of frustration for a child. Again, back to our OTs and PTs, we love them. I didn't even know this, but an OT can help with handwriting challenges. So if your child has some problems with fine motor skills or hand weakness, muscle weakness, an OT can help with that. And so Alexander said I could say this. Anyway, she went to OT for handwriting for 2 years, and especially children with ADHD often have issues with handwriting. So her grasp is still incorrect, but it's better than it was. Some children are stubborn. Okay, and then of course we've kind of alluded to speech pathology. I do have to say my sister's a speech pathologist, so I'm pretty in favor of this. So speech pathologists can help not only speech, but with cognitive communication disorders, articulation, swallowing, syntax, phonics, disfluency or stuttering, semantics, and many other speech-related challenges. Okay, and again, I know y'all know about this, but when I was in the trenches, I didn't always have this bigger umbrella picture. So an audiologist can help with any hearing concerns, including an auditory processing delay, hearing loss, balance, and any auditory disorders. Audiologists and speech pathologists often work together as a team. So one of our children, I kept thinking, this child has got an auditory processing delay because you would say something and they just kind of have this deer in the headlights look, and then they'd respond. And so for whatever reason, I couldn't find an audiologist. The Collier Center was closed at UTD where my sister had done her master. I don't know what my problem was. I had them speech tested twice because they kind of work in tandem in some areas, and they tested low normal each time. But I kept thinking something is off. And so I finally found an audiologist. Oh, yes, that was correct, absolutely. And so, yeah, I mean, 1 percentile in one of the tests where 100 is ideal. So, and there's things that you can do. So we ended up getting, I don't think it's so needed now because I think the classrooms have been brought up to date acoustically. But a few years ago, they weren't, especially if you're in an older classroom. So there's such a thing called an FM auditory system. So a child wears a hearing aid, and then a teacher wears a microphone. So when that teacher speaks, it goes directly into your child's ear. And so particularly if you have a problem with filtering out background noise, that is amazing. And it's also great for ADHD kids too. And that's something that the district can provide. But if you want to have one to take with you to college or whatever, then you can consider doing that. Okay, another unusual specialist that I ended up finding out about is a neurovision optometrist. They can help evaluate how visual information is processed, visual perception, and how our vision integrates with other senses. They can detect problems sometimes that a generalized optometrist or an ophthalmologist may not uncover. I don't know exactly the fine line, how it works, but I will say just a very short story about my son. I was helping him with piano one time, and he was looking at the music, and he was tapping on this note. And I said, "What are you doing?" He was like, "I'm trying to get it to come into focus." And I was like, "What do you mean come into focus?" Well, we ended up having him tested. He said, "Well, one of my teachers said she thought maybe I was dyslexic." And this is a 7th grader. And I was like, what do you mean? You're not dyslexic? So we went and had him tested. There's a thing called a point of convergence. And you're supposed to be able to, that's not supposed to happen until you're like right here. And if it happens when you're out here, then you basically have blurred vision. You have double vision. And this poor kid had this for so many years, and we didn't even know. So he ended up doing, believe it or not, there's something called vision therapy. Y'all may be familiar with it, and it's fantastic. And now I think it's covered by insurance. So, and a lot of these are now covered by insurance. When I was in the trenches, they weren't all. But anyway, highly recommended if it's applicable. Okay. There's even a sleep specialist. Now, this is not for post-Halloween day, or we went to the zoo and we're exhausted and, you know, my child got up late and they're cranky and they've had too much candy. This is, what I'm talking about is a chronic, ongoing problem in which it's hard for your child perhaps to go to sleep, maybe to stay asleep, or both. It may be hard for your child to function during the day due to these poor sleep problems and lack of energy. So there's a sleep department at Children's that is fantastic. Highly recommended. And covered under most insurances. Okay. I'm going to put in a big plug for Counseling Works. So even when any or all of your child's challenges have been addressed, or to that point, they may experience stress and frustration as a result of the problem itself. It can be especially difficult to look around in a classroom and notice that other students are not struggling. School appears to be much easier for them. A counselor once told me it's the higher functioning individuals who seek counseling. So that made me feel good because I thought, well, I must be super high functioning then. So did you know that Waterview is part of a network of churches who partner with Counseling Works to provide counseling for its members, and Waterview will underwrite the majority of the cost to do this. Very, very small copay. And just an FYI, the elders don't get a list each week. You know, Connie Reeves, back in there again, they just find out, they just get charged a certain number of visits. It's the complete confidentiality. None of that information is ever divulged. Okay? They even had adoption support group periodically. So one pediatric group that we ended up going to is called Beckloff Pediatric. So it's kind of a counseling group, but had more than Counseling Works at that time. So they provided cognitive testing, social skills classes, ADHD coaching. I was just going to mention a social skills class that might seem kind of redundant to a lot of people, like, don't children just naturally know how to function in a social, yeah, our teacher, one of our teachers is saying, no way. So what happens in a social skills class? A child can better learn how to interact with their peers, to wait their turn, to express interest, and even empathy for others. And while many children may learn this at home, it might be more difficult for others as they're unable to read and accurately interpret facial expressions, body language, or the overall tone of somebody's verbal response. So these were fantastic. One of our children went to them and helped a lot. And I know I've already mentioned ADHD several times. I didn't realize they have coaching to help with school. They have recommendations to help organize, sequence work, prepare for exams, prepare for college boards, execute large projects. And I'm going to, before I forget, there is a fantastic website when I get to one of the other ones called Order Out of Chaos. Fantastic information for everybody, I think. Very, very, very good ideas about studying, planning, organizing. This Leslie Joselle, I believe, is the founder, and she has written books. She does webinars. She's super energetic. Super, super fantastic site. Y'all probably already know about early development programs that are available through your school district. And I'm sure there's those are the only ones I know about. So they can provide speech pathology services, language, physical, social language, and emotional development, and they're free if you go through your school district. So my daughter attended one for the part of a year when she was 3 to help with I think the correct term is disfluency for stuttering, which turned out to be developmental, but still, it was a great experience for her. Okay? And don't forget our schools. Mary Linda should be up here teaching this part. So if your child is in public school, there's something called a 504 plan that can provide legal accommodations to support your child and create a more equalized learning environment. And I know they have equivalents in private schools. There's instructional specialists who can facilitate the implementation of those accommodations, and they coordinate. And anyway, I feel like Mary Linda should be she's our school person. I will say I am very much, I'm very, very appreciative of the instructional specialists. My daughter had a fantastic experience in middle school after kind of a mediocre elementary school experience. And so she went with the right scaffolding and support. She went from being an AB student, which that's not bad. I'm not saying that's bad, but we just got a lot of pushback all the time. It was just an ongoing fight. And she went to middle school, got the support she needed, straight A honor student. I mean, to me, that is just phenomenal. Of course, there's reading specialists. I think that's what Lacey does. And then schools have various parenting programs. I cannot speak to that. I can sort of barely get myself here. And then there's also outside educational consultants. What time is it? Do I need to? Okay. Of course, you guys, I think, are probably way better at this than I am, just networking. Friends, family, church, social media. I was in a Moms in Prayer group for a while when Matthew was at the academy in Plano. And one of the moms introduced me to another mom whose child had migraine headaches, and we've become best buddies, and you know how that works. But I would say, just slip this in, that I think transparency is really the key, and not being afraid to share with someone that you trust, that we're struggling with this in our family. It is hard. I found this resource, or I haven't found this resource, or, and especially Christian sisters, can you pray with me about this? I think sometimes we're so like, I want everybody to think I'm perfect, and my children are perfect, and I live in a perfect home, and everything's perfect, and, we're not perfect. Nobody lives in a perfect situation, a perfect bubble. So I would just encourage us to kind of maybe be a little more free with, just sharing our life experiences. Okay, this is my big plug. I love Focus on the Family. Of course, be discerning as you would with anything else, but I have gotten some great, great educational information. I'll show you some books. Of course, they talk about family, marriage, parenting, really great information. I have some back-to-school stuff. I put together a back-to-school binder one year with information that they had on their website. But they have a couple of speakers from time to time, one that is particularly excellent who speaks about learning styles. Also on their website, at least they used to have an intake form that you could give to your child's teacher at the beginning of each year that it had very insightful questions that you could answer just to kind of give your child's teacher kind of a heads up. This is my child's personality. I did that for a few years. I'm not sure if they ever got read, but anyway, I felt better feeling like, I put it out there if they have time to look at this. So anyway, I think it's a great resource. Of course, there's old-fashioned books, and especially if they're recommended by a professional, and there are some great ones out there. So the one on the left, You're Smarter Than You Think, and then The Way They Learn, those are two that I learned about through Focus on the Family, and they are wonderful. And I use The Way They Learn book. That really helped me pinpoint one of my children, and I would take it with me to my 504 meetings and say, this is how this child learns. So how can we work with this to help them learn most efficiently? Anyways, there's some great resources out there. So I'll leave that up for a second. I was going to say, as moms, I can come back to it. As moms, we are problem solvers. That's our job, like from morning to when we go to bed, I think. Some days more so than others, right? I'm a designer, and this is an imperative characteristic of my skill set, as challenges are faced throughout projects and creativity and persistence are required to find solutions. In the same way, creativity and persistence are needed to support and provide scaffolding for our children, especially when they are experiencing problems. My mom was one of my biggest cheerleaders when we were trying to find some solutions, and she would say, "You're doing a great job, and you are not afraid to try new things." Right? So I would just say, don't be afraid to try new things, right? I would encourage you to cast a wide net when you're searching for solutions for your children. Some therapies are going to be like, they're just a winner right out of the gate. Like, why didn't we do this, 10 years ago? And then some are like, oh, we kind of wasted time on that. Some are not going to be as helpful, but you don't really know until you try them. So, be willing to try different things, right? And also remember that many challenges can be more easily resolved whenever a child is younger. Yet another cousin is a high school counselor, and she told me that it can be extremely difficult to help older students who have never received the services that they desperately need. Not only have these kids suffered in various ways academically throughout school, they may have felt isolated and frustrated while dealing with challenges that are beyond their control. And I know you guys already do this. Just be an encourager, always. That's our middle name as moms, right? But especially if your child is going through something difficult, really try to lift them up and help them. Okay. And obviously, I have not addressed all the problems or all the challenges a child might have. I don't know about dyslexia. I don't know about autism. I don't know about severe learning disability. There's so many, but my goal was just to share a few resources with you. So I will be your cheerleader. You can do it. All right. So thank you for listening.